Hi, this is a quick user guide to help you import data into your Arm Digital system. If you start using Arm Digital and have some existing data that you need to get into the platform, or maybe still collect data through some other sources also that you regularly want to import, this video should help you use our data import module to do that, also with some advanced use cases of linking data. Find import functionality usually in your menu of the system. If not, do reach out to your user support to activate that feature. And here you can simply upload a CSV file that is a simple spreadsheet format with your existing data to turn that into full-blown records of the Arm Digital Case Management System. So to have an example, a simple file here importing a few children with the name, phone, and address and the status so that we can easily find them. Let's try to import this together on my computer already. If you're working with Excel files, you usually, through the Save As or Export function, select a different type and save this as a CSV format in order to be able to import it here. And we see, selecting that file, there's 3 rows here from John, Jane, and Maria in the file detected. And going to the next step, I can configure some details on how to import these records. First, the import allows us to import any kind of data entities. So that could be a child, a school, or other secondary details as well. We need to specify which one this is. In this case, we're importing children for our education demo setup here. And then I will go to the next step to map the columns from my file to fields in the Arm Digital data structure. So from the columns here, we have the name, phone address, and status, which you see listed here. And then I can select a field into which that column should end up in the Arm Digital system. Often this is very obvious. The system offers you all the fields that are part of these children's profile in your system, so that is customized also to your use case usually. So I can map the name. This also allows typing to narrow down the options. Number, status can help us quickly find these again. And with that mapping of which column of my imported data should go where, as a last step, the system shows me a preview of the data. You also see the address, which in our setup is a map integration created field, actually gets parsed and mapped to a full-blown address information. And if this looks good, we can start the import. Otherwise, of course, you can also go back and check your mappings. Let's import these now. 3 records should be imported. And confirming this, you see the import took place. There's a bit of details in the history of your imports. You can also undo and delete the imported records again if you made some mistake or you want to redo things with a different data file. But for now, let's go to the children's overall list. If I search here, we see our 3 new records. And if I go to John's file, for example, we see the fields that were part of the import being filled here in this newly created record. So in this way, getting data into the system should be very easy. Let's look at a second import example and discuss a few advanced functionalities. Let's assume we also have a monthly survey asking our participants on how motivated they are. This could be a list. Let's jump to the side with some examples that is embedded in our children's profile to see their responses over time. Here's an example when the survey was conducted and how motivated the child was. And let's assume this is data we're not collecting directly with the Arm Digital app, but rather through some online form, maybe Google Forms, where we ask participants to submit their responses from time to time. I've created a sample file for this as well. Maybe an export of this survey data could look like this. We have the date of the survey response submitted. Participants have entered their name and phone number to help us identify them. And then they've given a rating of how motivated they have been at that point in time. Of course, this is very simplistic. You might have responses here from various people with many more questions as a baseline or endline survey. But as a minimal example, let's use this file and try to import that. That gives us the additional challenge that in this case, we want to import data also in a way that it's linked to the correct child's profile in our database so that we can see, filter, and analyze it in relation to that. The initial process, though, is very similar of our sample survey responses. And in the next step, again, select what type of records we're importing. In this case, we're not importing children, but rather survey responses. So I'll select this and go to the next step. And here again, the system lists out all the columns from our file: date, name, phone, and the motivated rating, here for us to map how they should be imported. If I click in here, you see there's a different choice of fields to select here for a mapping now, because this is now the record of a survey response. So you'll recognize these table headings here as options to select what should be imported into what structure. And for the date field, as this might be a more complex value in different formats, I also get the additional option to configure the value mapping, to configure how a date should be understood and interpreted by the system. If I click on this, I see a preview here. Our date format is not in the maybe most standard year, month, and day split, but rather we use the European format in our imported CSV file here, which is first the date, then the month, and then the year split by a dot. So with these placeholders here, I can configure that template. And in the preview, you see now the system is able to recognize the dates correctly and parse them to the expected results so that we can work with them in Arm Digital as well. So saving this, we want to import the participant who has given this response. But here, actually, we don't have a name field as part of our survey responses. Instead, what the system is storing is not the name and details of the participant, but rather it links a survey response to a certain ID of a child that is in our database. So for this, again, we need to import in a special way. The field that holds this link, this reference, is the related record in this case. So I can select that. But identifying the correct child's database item is difficult using the name. In our example here, I've given an example. If we ask people to put their name into a survey form, they might spell it differently from time to time, which makes it impossible to reliably determine who this response actually belongs to. So what a better practice may be is using different unique information of the person to help us link, like a phone number or an email address, something that has a more consistent and clear spelling. So in our case, we'll use the phone number to identify the right child who has given this response. I'll skip the name field here, not import that, and instead use the phone column from our file to create a link to the related record that's already in our database in this children's list. This again, of course, is a complex import operation, so we have the need to configure a value mapping, configure details of that import, because we need to define how to identify through this value the correct child. What the system gives us here is all the fields of the child's profile. What we see here also as during our import of new children. And I would select for this the phone number of the child as the relevant field the system will compare during import. So whenever the phone number from this column of the import is matching a child's record, then it's creating this link. And in some cases, you might also have some values, some phone numbers that actually don't match to any child in your database currently, then that link would not be imported. Just the other fields are imported, and you can manually, maybe at a later point, in the Digital user interface, go to that record and correct the link if necessary. For now, we're using here the phone number, and then as a last step to map our import, we have the column containing the rating of our participant, how motivated they are. This is a straightforward mapping. We want to put that into the field in our observations for this motivated rating. But in the case of our data structure here, this is not just a text field, but rather a drop-down of categories to rate the motivation. So due to this, again, there's the option to help you do a data cleanup during the import and make sure that values end up in the right categories of Arm Digital as you would expect them. So for these categorical fields during the import, on the left, you will see all the values that appear in your data from the imported file. We have usually in two different spellings here to explain that functionality also, absolutely. And on the right, we can map what category this should become after the import in the Arm Digital system. So our two different spellings of usually should end up in the same category. We can select that twice. Absolutely will become absolutely. And with this, now we have completed our configuration for the import. This was quite a lot of work compared to our simple example earlier, but it helps you not having to deal with a lot of data cleanup and preparations of your file before you upload it. Rather, we want the Arm Digital platform to help you map and sort through your data for the imports. Let's go forward to the preview, and we see not only has it recognized the categories and is already using the color coding, demonstrating that, but also the link through the phone number has worked. We see that these three responses are related to John Doe's record in our database. And that is also despite him spelling his name differently in the responses, because we were able to go through that phone number to link and create a reference. So let's do the import here as well. And when we go to John's profile, as you would expect in the observations, we see these 3 records imported, ready for your team to see the history of his motivation, but of course then also available for a wider analysis generated in reports out of the children's profile and the responses that are linked to them.